She was standing in the kitchen, barefoot, still chewing the last bite of the sandwich I had made for him. I didn't say anything. I just watched. Watched the way she leaned against the counter like it was just another Tuesday. Like she hadn't just handed me a goodbye disguised as a lunch order. The sink was full of dishes she promised to wash yesterday, but I didn't care. My eyes were locked on the wrapper, the one I had scribbled, extra mustard, no onions. For the gym guy, as a joke. She laughed when I handed it to her. Now she wasn't laughing. She looked at me like I'd ruined something sacred. Like I was the one who crossed a line. And maybe I had, because I didn't knock when I entered. I was supposed to be at work. I never come home at noon. But today, I forgot my badge. That's all it took. One forgotten badge and a turn of the key. I saw the text before I saw her. His name wasn't saved. Just a number. But I knew. Because she didn't text me like that. She didn't send me 6 hearts in a row. She didn't say, I can still taste you. When I heard the microwave beep from the hall, I knew she wasn't alone. I imagined them laughing in the living room. Him shirtless. Her glowing. But it was just her. And the sandwich. And the smell of someone else's cologne still hanging in the air like a dare. She swallowed. Set the plate down. Folded her arms like she was cold, though it was 79 degrees inside. I remember because I had checked the thermostat before leaving that morning, she always complained it was too chilly. Why are you home? She asked. Not what's wrong. Not let me explain. Just why are you home? I think that was the moment something snapped. Not in a movie way, no shouting, no glass thrown across the room, no storming out. I just deflated. I looked at her, really looked, and I couldn't see the woman I used to love. I couldn't even see someone I liked. Just someone who had already left and forgot to take her body with her. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out the envelope I was planning to drop in the mailbox during lunch, and held it out to her. She blinked. What's this? My resignation, I said, trying to smile. From this role. This house. From making sandwiches for other men. She didn't laugh. Just stared. She didn't even open it. Not then. But I knew she would. Because inside that envelope was everything I never had the guts to say out loud. And once she read it, there'd be no coming back. But that comes later. First, you need to know what the letter said. She didn't open it. Not while I stood there like a wet paper bag collapsing in on itself. She just stared at the envelope in her hand, like it was radioactive. I could practically see her calculating what it meant. A bluff? A guilt trip? One of my dramatic little episodes? But it wasn't. This time, I meant every word on that paper. I had spent 4 nights writing it, deleting lines, rewriting them, pacing the kitchen floor at 2 a.m. in socks that kept slipping because I hadn't done laundry in weeks. I wanted it to say everything I couldn't scream. Everything that would make her remember she hadn't just betrayed a man. She had dismantled someone who was willing to carry her weight for the rest of his life. I'll come by for the rest of my stuff this weekend, I said, my voice barely hanging on to coherence. She opened her mouth like she had a rebuttal. I knew that look. The one she used during arguments she already knew she'd win, the you're overreacting look. I didn't give her the space to speak. I just grabbed my keys and walked out. The hallway outside our apartment smelled like stale carpet cleaner. I've always hated that smell, but that day I found it oddly grounding. It reminded me the world still existed outside of the soap opera my life had become. I sat in my car for a while, just gripping the steering wheel with both hands, forehead resting on the back of my knuckles. The apartment window above me stayed dark. She didn't bother to look out. No running after me. No tears. No collapsing in regret like the movies. I guess that's what hurt the most. I drove aimlessly. Through streets we used to walk on. Past the diner where she once cried over pancakes because she thought she'd failed at life. I had held her hand then. Promised her things would get better. I believed that when I said it. And I think she did too back then. Anyway, I ended up in front of a bowling alley I hadn't seen in years. I don't even bowl. But the parking lot was empty, and I needed somewhere to exist without questions. I scrolled through my phone. No new messages. I wasn't surprised. Just for the record, I never caught them in bed. Never saw her kiss him. Never had that big, cinematic reveal with screams and doors slamming. But the betrayal was worse than any physical act. She gave him my spot, the emotional front row seat I earned with time, loyalty, and late-night grocery runs. She let him into her mind. Her smile. Her world. While I sat 2 feet away, begging for scraps of her attention. That's what I wrote about in the letter. I told her how I noticed the changes. How I stopped being her morning thought and started being her afterthought. I reminded her of the night she got drunk at her cousin's wedding and danced barefoot under string lights with me. whispering that no one made her feel like I did. I asked her what happened to that version of her, the one who chose me not because I was perfect, but because I made her feel safe, even when the world didn't. I ended the letter with a question I knew she wouldn't be able to answer. When did I become invisible to you? I didn't need her reply. The silence would be enough. Later that night, I booked a room at a roadside motel. Beige curtains, buzz from the fridge, walls thin enough to hear a guy next door arguing with someone over speakerphone. Still, it was the first time in months I could breathe without bracing for another lie. Then, and I swear I'm not making this up, at around 2:17 a.m., I got a text from her. Just 2 words. I read it. I didn't reply. Not because I was trying to be strong, but because my hands literally wouldn't move. I stared at the screen until it went black, then forced myself to turn it over. Somewhere between that moment and sunrise, something changed in me. Not a full transformation. I didn't become a stronger man overnight. But I felt the first spark, the one that tells you you're not done. You're just beginning again. And the strangest part? The letter didn't just change me. It changed her too. But you won't believe what she did next. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I drifted in and out, heart thudding at every creak of the motel wall, mind flickering between fragments of the past and her text. I read it. I didn't know what that meant. Was it guilt? Defiance? A ploy to get me talking? It didn't matter. I had said what I needed to say. And for once, I wasn't going to scramble after a conversation I never asked to have in the first place. By 7 a.m., I was sitting in my car again, sipping a terrible coffee from a vending machine in the motel lobby, watching early commuters rush past like they had lives that still made sense. I had nowhere to be, no one expecting me, and somehow that felt both terrifying and liberating. The silence in my life had finally outgrown hers. I was debating whether to go see my brother, someone who hadn't heard from me in months because I was always too busy keeping Marley's world together, when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a video. From her. I almost dropped the phone. My thumb hovered over the screen for a full minute before I pressed play. And what I saw wasn't what I expected. The camera was shaky at first. Then it focused. Marley was standing in our bedroom, still in her robe, no makeup, her hair pulled back. The exact way she looked on lazy Sundays when we'd read separate books in the same bed and feel connected without even speaking. She didn't say hello. She didn't explain herself. She just started reading. Out loud. She was reading the letter. Word for word. Every line I had written in anger, in heartbreak, in surrender, she spoke them back with a tremble in her voice I hadn't heard in years. Her voice cracked when she read the part about the scarf. She paused when she got to the question, when did I become invisible to you? And then she did something that undid me. She answered it. I think it started when I began believing I deserved more. But I mistook more for else. You weren't the problem, Dorian. I was just too stupid to realize that everything I thought I was missing was already in front of me. And now I don't know how to fix what I broke. She was crying now, not sobbing, but the kind of quiet, steady crying you do when you finally understand that you've ruined something irreplaceable. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to scream. Why now? Part of me wanted to drive straight home and hold her like none of this had happened. And a darker part of me wanted her to hurt longer. Wanted her to sit in that silence for days the way I had for months. But before the video ended, she added something that stopped me cold. I told him it's over, she said, eyes red, lips trembling. I told him I made a mistake. He laughed and said I'd come crawling back in a week. I blocked his number. I'm not proud of what I did, but I don't want to lose you over a version of myself I don't even like anymore. Then the screen went black. That should have been the end, right? But somehow, that moment was the beginning of the real unraveling. Not the kind she expected. And definitely not what I expected either. Because while she was finally breaking down, trying to rebuild something from the ashes, I was about to discover something else. Something she didn't know I knew. And it had nothing to do with Coulson. I didn't respond to the video. I couldn't. Not because I was playing games or trying to seem cold, but because something about it felt staged. I know that sounds paranoid, especially since she looked so raw, so exposed, and I know Marley. She hates being seen like that. But still, something didn't sit right. I kept asking myself, why now? Why read the letter out loud? Why record it? Why not just call? I played the video again. This time slower. Watching not her face, but the background. The dresser was missing the little ceramic tray I had made in pottery class years ago, the one she always kept her rings in. Her side of the closet looked thinner. A few hangers dangled empty. And then it hit me. She had already started packing. She filmed the video after she had decided to leave. She wasn't trying to reconcile. She was softening the blow, trying to appear broken so I'd believe it was a moment of clarity, when really, it was a way to exit cleanly. It worked on the old me, but not anymore. And that's when I remembered the box. A week earlier, I had noticed a sealed Amazon package in the garage under the workbench. It had Marley's name on it, but no label, no branding. At the time, I thought it was just another bulk shampoo order or some quirky subscription box. I didn't question it. But now, in the light of everything that was unraveling, it gnawed at me. I drove straight home. I didn't care if she was there. I was done being polite in my own life. The apartment was quiet when I arrived. She wasn't there. Her car was gone. But her scent, that lavender vanilla perfume, still lingered, haunting the doorway like an echo of who she used to be. I went into the garage. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped a screwdriver pulling the box out. When I finally opened it, I didn't find shampoo. I didn't find candles. I didn't find anything I was prepared for. Inside were neatly folded papers, organized into categories. Flight confirmations, Airbnbs, spa reservations, dinner bookings. 2 names on every document, Marley Evans and Trevor Cray. I didn't recognize the name. It wasn't Coulson. It wasn't the guy she ended things with. This was someone else. Someone who had already booked a wine-tasting tour with her in California. Someone who had a joint reservation for a 3-night romantic retreat with fireplace, private balcony, and couples massage, all confirmed under our shared email. She just hadn't deleted the receipts. And in the corner of the box, wrapped in gold foil, was a watch. It was expensive. Rolex. With an engraving on the back that said, "For what comes next, M." It wasn't for me. That's when the puzzle started clicking into place. Coulson wasn't the problem. He was a decoy. The mistake she admitted to, the one she cried over in the video, was a distraction from the real betrayal. Coulson was a spark. Trevor was the plan. This wasn't some emotional affair or moment of confusion. She was leaving. Quietly. With a backup life already in motion. The video wasn't a confession. It was her trying to leave with dignity in case things didn't go her way. And the worst part? She had the nerve to act like she was choosing me. As I stood there in that garage, surrounded by printed itineraries and luxury plans for 2, I finally understood. She wasn't sorry. She was scared. Scared that Trevor would flake. Scared that the new fantasy wouldn't be worth the ashes of the man she left behind. Scared that her ladder to something shinier might collapse halfway up. She wanted to keep a foot in both worlds until she was sure. But I wasn't going to let her. So I took every document, every reservation, every perfectly printed plan, and I put them into a new envelope. This one wasn't a letter. It was a mirror. And I was going to make sure she saw herself for exactly who she was, not the crying woman in a robe, but the architect of her own deception. And when I delivered it, everything shifted. I didn't sleep that night either. I just sat on the floor of the garage with all the papers laid out around me like I was some detective in a crime drama trying to piece together a conspiracy board. Only this wasn't fiction. It was my life. My wife. And the evidence wasn't some grainy photo or shady email. It was a full itinerary of betrayal. Prepaid. Color-coded. I stared at her name, printed next to his, over and over, Marley Evans and Trevor Cray. The dinner reservations. The tandem bike rental. The vineyard picnic basket order. The private tasting labeled for couples celebrating fresh beginnings. It was also curated. Like she wanted her betrayal to look good in photos. Like it wasn't enough to leave, she had to romanticize it. Somewhere around 4:30 a.m., I stopped shaking. I wasn't numb. I wasn't angry. I was clear. For the first time in months, my mind wasn't spiraling in confusion. I knew what I had to do. I carefully placed every page, every receipt, every printed plan back into the envelope. I added a note on top, just one line. You planned a perfect goodbye. So did I. Then I sealed it. She came home late the next evening. I had parked my car 3 blocks away and walked back so she wouldn't know I was there. I sat at the edge of the hallway where the shadows pooled, waiting. I heard the keys, the door, the rustle of a purse, the casual footsteps of someone who thought they still owned the narrative. She didn't see me at first. She walked straight to the kitchen, dropped her bag, and pulled a bottle of wine from the fridge. I stepped out just as she turned to grab a glass. She gasped, nearly dropped the bottle. Dorian. Jesus, you scared me. What are you? I held up the envelope. I thought this might help you pack. She froze. Her face did that thing where it tried to figure out which version of herself to wear, the concerned wife? The guilty one? The woman who still had control? I gave her nothing to work with. Just silence. She stepped forward slowly, arms crossing. Look, I know I hurt you. I know I've made mistakes. But I'm not leaving you for Coulson, if that's what you think. That's over. I ended it. You saw the video. I nodded. I did. Her eyes darted to the envelope. So, then what's this? I set it gently on the counter beside the glass. Everything you didn't tell me. Everything you were going to pretend never existed. She didn't reach for it. She just stared. I know about Trevor, I said. Calm. Even. I know about the California trip. The watch. The joint plans. You weren't coming back to me, Marley. You were trying to keep me as your emergency exit. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Just a slow exhale, like someone being cornered in a lie so intricate, even they can't remember what's real anymore. Why didn't you just leave? I asked. And I meant it. I wasn't asking to guilt her. I genuinely wanted to understand. Why pretend to be sorry when your suitcase was already packed? She leaned against the fridge and said nothing for a long time. Then finally, because I wasn't sure he wanted me after all, there it was. Not love. Not regret. Just fear. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so honest. After all the layered lies and emotional fog, this was finally the truth. She wasn't trying to come back to me. She was trying not to end up alone. I picked up my coat and turned to leave. But just as I reached the door, she called after me. Wait, what are you going to do with all of it? I looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt like a man holding a match near a house of cards that wasn't his to save anymore. That depends, I said, on how honest you are with the people who still think you're someone worth loving. And I left. But this story wasn't over. Not even close. Because what she did next, it went viral. The funny thing about betrayal is how quickly it spreads once the lid is cracked open. You think you're holding this shameful secret alone, like it's some private storm only you got caught in. But the moment a sliver of daylight hits it, you realize people have been watching the clouds gather the whole time. They just didn't know where the thunder would land. After I left Marley standing in our kitchen with that envelope full of her perfectly scheduled getaway, I didn't go to a friend's. I didn't crash at my brother's place. I drove straight to a nearby co-working space that I used occasionally for client calls and grabbed a quiet room. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was steady, focused. This wasn't about revenge. This was about exposure, about truth. I opened my laptop, pulled out my phone, and transferred everything, every document, photo, receipt, and the video she had sent me to a private drive. I redacted her personal information, blurred out account numbers and sensitive data. I was meticulous. I wasn't looking to ruin her life. I just wanted people to see her real one. There was one more thing I uploaded. My letter. The original. Word for word, unedited. I posted the entire folder under the title. She told me she made one mistake. This is what one mistake really looks like. I didn't post it to Reddit. Not at first. I uploaded it anonymously to a relationship truth forum with a disclaimer that it wasn't for attention, it was a record. A time capsule of how someone can spend years building something with you while quietly digging the exit tunnel behind your back. I thought maybe a few people would read it. Maybe one or two would relate. But within hours, it exploded. Someone reposted it to Twitter, then TikTok, then Facebook. I woke up the next morning with over 600 email notifications and a flooded inbox. People were commenting things like, "This reads like a novel. I don't know who Dorian is, but I'd buy him a drink." And the quiet ones always drop the loudest endings. Apparently, my story hit a nerve. But not everyone was on my side. Some people accused me of being too calm. If this really happened, he wouldn't be so composed, they said. Others claimed I must have pushed her away, that no woman plans an escape that elaborate unless she's been emotionally abandoned. I read every comment, every accusation, every misguided attempt to turn my heartbreak into a two-sided tale. But then came the real twist. I received an email from someone named Isla Cray. Subject line, "I think I'm Trevor's wife." I nearly dropped my phone. I opened it, hands trembling, eyes darting across the text. "Hi. I don't know you, but someone sent me the link to your post. I think my husband is the Trevor in your story. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I had no idea he was involved with someone else. We've been together for 8 years. We have a child. I'm still processing this, but I just wanted you to know. You're not the only one who was being lied to." I stared at that message for what felt like an hour. Trevor wasn't just some random guy Marley had fallen for. He was a full-time fraud. A husband. A father. A man who was ready to run off with my wife while his own family sat at home thinking he was at a corporate retreat. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know how. What do you say to someone who's unknowingly living in the same nightmare? Instead, I forwarded the email to Marley. No message. No context. Just the raw truth. An hour later, she called me. I didn't answer. She texted me 15 times in a row. Paragraphs. Walls of apologies. Denials. Shifting blame like sandbags in a sinking boat. Then came the final text. Why are you doing this to me? That broke me. Not the heartbreak. Not the cheating. Not even the planning. But that. Even after everything, she still saw herself as the victim. I sat in that co-working space until the sun started to drop behind the trees, watching the world read our unraveling like it was a trending saga. Marley didn't post anything publicly. No denial. No apology. Nothing. But I heard from friends that she took time off work. That she canceled the trip. That Trevor's wife had confronted him and moved out that same day. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. Because even after exposing everything, I was still the guy who made the sandwich. The guy who gave his heart and got a calendar full of betrayal in return. But I wasn't done. There was one last message I needed to deliver. One final act before I vanished from her story for good. It was raining when she showed up. Not the cinematic kind of rain. No thunder. No dramatic downpour. Just a steady drizzle that made everything look blurry and tired. I was sitting in the apartment I'd rented a few blocks from my old place, sipping reheated coffee in a hoodie that hadn't been washed in days, when I heard the knock. I didn't look through the peephole. I didn't need to. I could feel her presence like a cold draft slipping under the doorframe. I opened it. There she was. Marley. Soaked from head to toe, strands of hair clinging to her face, makeup barely holding on, and eyes full of something I hadn't seen in a long time, actual fear. Not the kind you fake to gain sympathy. The kind that comes when the ground beneath you is genuinely gone, and you're not sure if you'll survive the landing. She didn't say anything at first. Just stared. Like she thought maybe I'd slam the door. Or laugh. Or scream. I did none of those things. I stepped aside. She entered slowly, cautiously, like she was walking into a memory she wasn't sure she was allowed to touch anymore. Her eyes scanned the room, minimalist, barely furnished, mattress on the floor, one lamp, some old books, a nearly dead plant I kept forgetting to water. I watched her register the simplicity, the distance from everything we once had. You're really gone, she said softly. I nodded. She turned to face me. I don't even know where to start. Then don't, I said, gesturing to the table. On it was a folder. Labeled, The Truth You Forgot to Pack. She didn't move. I know about Isla, I said. I know about Trevor's wife. I know he has a kid. And I know you knew too. Her eyes widened. Her mouth twitched. She tried to speak, but I held up a hand. I also know that you had a backup plan in case he didn't leave her. That you weren't sure you wanted to go all in with him unless you could keep me as your safety net. Your plan B. The steady, dependable guy in the background. Dorian, please, she tried. But I kept going. You weren't just unfaithful. You were strategic. Calculated. You curated your exit like a vacation itinerary. And when it crumbled, you came back to me with tears and soft voices like it had all just been a misstep. She sat down without asking. She looked tired. Not physically, but like someone who'd been running from their reflection for too long and had finally hit a wall of mirrors. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered. I believe you, I said. But that's not the point. She glanced at the folder. What's in there? I took a deep breath. Everything. Copies of your messages. Screenshots. The full timeline. Your video. Trevor's information. The truth, unpolished. Why? Because you're going to give it to HR at your job, I said, locking eyes with her. She blinked. What? I'm not going to ruin you, Marley. I'm not going to make a scene or post another thing. But you're going to walk in, hand it over, and tell them why you're taking a leave of absence. You're going to own what you did, not just to me, but to the people you lied to while representing your company. Because while I was out here trying to find a way to grieve in peace, you were still trying to control the narrative. She stood up, her voice shaking. You want to humiliate me? No, I said calmly. I want you to take responsibility. Not with tears. Not with a camera. But with truth. She looked like she might scream. Or collapse. But instead, she sat back down and stared at the folder. I could lose everything, she said. So did I. The silence that followed was heavier than anything we'd said. She eventually reached for the folder. Touched it like it was hot. Then pulled her hand back. I'm not ready, she muttered. You don't have to be, I said. But you owe it to yourself, and to every version of me that you lied to do this without a safety net. No soft exits. No half apologies. She picked up the folder. Tears welled in her eyes again, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she stood, walked to the door, and paused with her hand on the knob. Will you ever forgive me? She asked without turning around. I didn't answer, and she didn't wait for one. When the door clicked shut behind her, I stood there in the silence, the rain still tapping softly against the window. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel justified. I just felt empty. But it was the kind of empty that makes room for something new. And that's when I decided to do one last thing. Not for her. For me. 3 weeks passed after Marley walked out of my apartment with that folder tucked under her arm like a ticking clock. I didn't check up on her. I didn't dig for updates through mutual friends or stalk her social media. I didn't even reopen the group chats she was still in. I let it all go, not because it didn't matter anymore, but because I finally realized that obsessing over the outcome of someone else's actions was like trying to rewrite a book that had already gone to print. I spent those weeks doing something I hadn't done in years. Living for myself. I started walking more. I rediscovered my sketchbook, something I hadn't touched since college, and began drawing again. Not big, dramatic portraits or anything worth framing. Just quiet sketches of life. The curve of a coffee cup on a table, the bent spine of a used paperback, my own shoes by the door. I stopped punishing myself for feeling hurt and stopped measuring my healing by how quickly I could move on. Then one morning, I woke up and didn't think about her first. It was such a simple thing, a blink, a breath, but it hit me like a sunrise after years of gray. For the first time in a long time, my story wasn't tangled up in hers. Later that week, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. But I recognized the script. Neat. Slanted. Marley's. I debated opening it. Then I did. It was short. Just 1 page. Dorian. I turned it in. All of it. HR accepted my resignation. I've started seeing a therapist. I've moved back in with my sister. I told Trevor's wife everything. She deserved that truth too. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know I heard you, finally. Not the version I imagined you were, but the man you really are. The man I should have valued when I had the chance. You were never plan B. I just wasn't ready for someone that real. Marley. I sat with that letter for a long time. Not crying. Not boiling. Just still. And then, I folded it up, placed it in a drawer next to my sketchbook, and went outside. That same day, I walked into a local bookstore, one I always passed but never entered. I ended up chatting with the woman behind the counter for half an hour about mystery novels and coffee beans. Her name was Elodie, and she had the kind of laugh that made you feel like you just remembered a good memory. We've had coffee 3 times since then. No expectations. No romantic spark forced into something it's not. Just 2 people, sitting across from each other, sharing silences that don't feel like voids. Maybe something will grow from it. Maybe it won't. But either way, I'm not afraid of life anymore. I'm not afraid of being hurt, or walking alone, or starting again. Because I know now that I can survive being broken and still build something beautiful in the aftermath. Marley's betrayal didn't destroy me. It introduced me to myself. And the man I found on the other side? He finally feels like someone worth loving, whether anyone else shows up to or not.